whether we want to be called gurus or influencers or thought leaders in the space, whatever term you want to use, there's a natural tendency to always want to talk about what's new. I think we sometimes overcorrect to wanting to talk about what's new because everybody wants to be the first to talk about it because that's what's going to get the most attention. And one of the things I think we do that's a failure back to our audience is going back to talk about what's improved and what's changed and what is something that you weren't doing before that you're doing today.
Welcome to Top of Search with Robin and Abe, where we talk about e-commerce, Amazon, and more.
Welcome to the Top of Search podcast. Today, I have one of my favorite people in the entire world. Not only is he brilliant at Amazon and marketing and being able to really articulate all of the amazing things that are happening at Amazon advertising, he's also an amazing friend. He's just genuinely a good person and so kind to make time out of his busy schedule to be with us. So thank you, Jeff, so much for coming on the show today. For people who don't know you, can you just tell them just a snippet of your awesomeness?
Yeah, well, thank you for that kind introduction. Obviously, I've been great friends with both Robin and you and Abe for a number of years, and I've appreciated not just our friendship, but our camaraderie and everything that everybody has done for the overall community. For those who don't know me, my name is Jeff Cohen. I've been in the Amazon space since like 2005. I don't even know how many years that is now, 20 years now. I guess it's 2025, so 20 years now. I've been with Amazon for the last 3 years, and prior to joining Amazon, I ran a company called Seller Labs.
And you've been at Amazon for so long. What would be really interesting is because we could there's so much content that you put out about all of the amazing things that are rolling out at Amazon, but I would love to hear more about what has it been like going from working with people on the seller side to kind of working inside the house, and maybe some things that you've learned from being at Amazon that maybe might be interesting to people who've been only on the seller side.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So one of the things, if I was to think about that, and one is all of my competitors became my customers, which was awesome for me because my competitors were also my friends. Because when we go to these different industry events, and I'll say when the lights go out, right, and everybody leaves the show, the people who come early and the people who stay late are typically the other exhibitors and service providers who are there. And so I had become very close with a number of the service providers. And now that I'm on the Amazon Ads partner team, I work with our close to 3,000 partners globally, which means it's all of my friends. The other thing that I think is really interesting about Amazon is that we study as sellers, as brands, as service providers, we study the Amazon leadership principles because we know that those leadership principles drive the motivation and the mechanisms by which Amazon operates. But reading them and learning them and actually experiencing them inside of Amazon is different. And it doesn't mean that if you haven't worked at Amazon, you can't understand them. But one of the things that maybe I didn't fully understand was that they literally are the principles that are used every single day in every single meeting. And you will be questioned and asked, are you truly being customer obsessed? Have you dived deep enough into that data to understand the impact that it would have? Are you thinking big enough, right? All these concepts that you read about within the principles, it's not what makes Amazon successful isn't that the principles exist. It's how they put the principles into action on a daily basis. And the third thing that I think was probably the most, I don't want to say challenging, but maybe it was challenging, was how big you have to think when you're at Amazon. And it's just logical if you think about the size and the scope of what Amazon is trying to do as a business, that you have to think big enough about things that can truly impact the overall business, right? I mean, the Amazon Ads business is a very large business. And the things that I was doing at Seller Labs to impact a company doing a few $1 million is at an exponential scale. But at Amazon, I like to say things can be very slow as you're getting something started, as something new is getting going. But the power and the amplification that Amazon has to take something that's working and to drive it to a high level of success is unlike anything I've ever seen before at any company I've ever worked at. And it's really cool to see how it all kind of comes together when you get to watch the sausage being made, so to speak.
Yeah, it's funny because when you're mentioning the customer obsession part, always when I try to interpret things that Amazon does, my first framework is Amazon doing this for the customer? And I said, this action helps the customer, even if other stakeholders in the process might not see it this way, but that sort of leads to a question, or maybe two layers of question. So the first one is when it comes to customer obsession and when it comes to an idea being reviewed for how much it's going to help the customer, there are other people who are impacted. Of course, Amazon itself is impacted when something is done for a customer, and the other partners who are sellers or software providers, anybody who interacts with Amazon besides a buyer is impacted also. How much weight? I don't know. I'm sure it's nothing official, but is it 100% customer, everybody else follow along? Or is there some thought about, hey, how are we going to implement this? Or how will everybody else work with this thing?
So the term we use internally is looking around corners, right? And so if a team is good at what they do, they should be looking around corners to understand the other impacts that can happen. That doesn't mean to say that every scenario will always be discussed every time, because I think that there are quite a number of times where things happen inadvertently, right? And so there's maybe a corner that wasn't looked around, or there was an impact that wasn't foreseen. And so the speed at which Amazon wants to operate is a very fast speed, as you guys know from being in this space. And so when we look at decisions as what we call one-way door decisions and two-way door decisions. Now, a one-way door decision is a decision that you cannot go back on. Once you've opened the door, you can't go back. A really great example of this, going way back in time, was third-party sellers. Once you opened up the marketplace to third-party sellers, you couldn't really come back and say, we're not going to have third-party sellers. When you're dealing with one-way door decisions, they typically have a higher level of scrutiny that is going to ensure that those corners are looked around. When you're dealing with two-way door decisions, these are decisions that can be reversed if they are not working properly or can be altered very quickly. You will move at a speed to, and this is a data point that I shared even before I was at Amazon, which is you have the data that you have in front of you that you're going to use to make a decision. And as that data changes, you may need to change the decision that you made. And so that's how you should view a two-way door decision, is that you're making the best decision for the customer at the time that you're making the decision. And if down the road, the data is starting to indicate that something has changed, then you should make a change. Now, something that I think is really important is if we go back in Amazon's history, even before I joined, Amazon very clearly always has defined the customer as the shopper. But if you listen and you read different articles and quarterly reports, and statements by Andy Jassy actually lists a whole host of customers as the customer, partners being one, sellers being one, the shopper, of course, being one. And so we do have to take into account that there are different types of customers, different customer archetypes that can be impacted by decisions that occur. And I think that a good team is looking around as many corners as they can to understand what that impact can be. And I think the thing that I probably share the most with people is that most things are probably done inadvertently, not with any foresight into it. I knew this was going to happen, right? And that's what happens when you do rapid product development and when you're trying to grow a business. And I think that Amazon needs to be clear in listening to that feedback as it comes in and understanding what changes then need to be made. The last thing I'll just kind of leave this on is to say that selling is an emotional business, right? As sellers, it's an emotional business. And therefore, any decision that's made that impacts our business is an emotional decision. And I think that as a customer, that is taken into account. But as if you look at it from the 50,000 foot view, it's always the shopper who they're ultimately trying to ensure has the right product, has the right selection, is getting it at the best price, is getting the best customer experience. And when you break down a lot of what happens, it really does come down to that level of simplicity, even though maybe, that's not how somebody may see it in the moment, right? From the emotional standpoint.
Yeah, when I'm talking to brands, they'll be like, I think Amazon's doing this. I'm like, nobody at Amazon has time to single anybody out, And, I will bring, if you're not familiar with the principle he's talking about, there's 14 guiding principles of Amazon. And if you want to sell on Amazon, sometimes I'll have a brand that'll be like, well, we don't want to do this. And I'm like, if you can't be aligned with customer obsession, you should not be making Amazon a priority distribution channel, because it is so fundamental. And I do think that people get kind of caught up in that. Is there anything that when you were at Seller Labs, if you knew now, you might have approached a product differently, or an example of maybe if you feel like sellers knew kind of how things worked internally and how those principles are not just fluff, but they're really the things that are really measured and talked about, that you feel like they might approach some of the conflicts that they have with Amazon differently?
I think there's two ways the one thing that is important to know is that the leadership principles are not absolute. They actually have a tension between one another, right? And so it's like, how do you have a bias for action, but at the same point in time, you dive deep to understand, right? Like that has a natural tension within it that says, move quickly, but make sure you're going deep enough. And so what ends up happening is that you have people in any organization where some people are going deep, some people are moving with action, with bias for action. Some people will over index for one leadership principle and under index for another. And I think that's part of the natural tension that occurs within a team that makes for better products, because we're challenging each other internally. I think externally, what do I know now that I wish I knew then? It's, really go back to understanding the impact of the customer and framing it not into me, but the customer and the customer impact. And it's hard. Again, it's hard because it's an emotional type of decision, but that's the best framework that you can use. And the other thing is that Amazon has evolved quite a bit, even in the last 3 years that I've been here. And there's a lot of tools and there's a lot of data within both Seller Central and within the Ad Console that's available to you as a seller. And the number of times that people may come to me and I'll say, like, have you hit the call me button on Seller Central? And they go, no, I haven't done that. I'm like, well, you need to do that. Or have you opened a case to have this investigated? No, well, you need to do that. And so understand that there are systems and processes that you need to follow, and that, that they're designed to help you get to the resolutions that you want or that you need. And, that's the biggest thing that I've probably learned is, and I think that Amazon has, being vocally self-critical, I think Amazon has gotten way better at that over the years, but there's probably still room to grow, right?
When Amazon releases features, releases updates, changes policies a little bit, you mentioned the two-way doors. Does Amazon look at these releases as something to be ready to yank immediately if the immediate response is completely unexpected? Or do they really fully commit and say, everybody, you better take some time to understand this before we make an alteration, or something in the middle?
Yeah. I'm mainly on the ad side of the equation, which means that most of the things that I'm seeing are coming through the ads side of the business. And so I can't really speak to what's happening in the other channels. But I can tell you that, like, when we look at like new releases, they're going through a process where they're going out to our partners in a closed beta, to where our partners are able to interact with the technology, or an advertiser's interacting with the technology, and we're getting that kind of firsthand experience back from either an advertiser or a partner that's bringing the product up to what we call a minimally lovable product, meaning that we have to bring the product out to market and we have to then test it, and then we have to get the feedback back from it. And that's part of our like product iteration process that we have. And we work with, hundreds, if not thousands of partners and advertisers before sometimes the product moves to what we call an open beta, which is where it's publicly announced, but it's still being kind of worked on and developed. And I think a really great example of this, I'll give you two great examples. One is one we've all kind of seen for a long time, which was Amazon Marketing Cloud. And so Amazon Marketing Cloud was out there. It had been out there. It had a bar for participation that you needed to be on the Amazon DSP to access it. We were getting constant feedback from advertisers that they wanted to be able to access it even if they weren't using the DSP. And so we worked with a select group of advertisers to develop Amazon Marketing Cloud for sponsored ads, which we released at Unboxed in October. And that's a great example of how we take that customer feedback and we develop product. Another one is one that was recently released, the 5-year look back window, which is a feature within AMC. The look back window is typically 13 months, but we had a lot of our CPG brands saying, yeah, but we want to understand what the long-term impact is of our advertising. When we bring somebody on and they buy a product, are they buying more products? How are they moving from a main product to a hero product to a family of products? And a longer look back window was necessary for being able to do that level of analysis to understand what happens when somebody buys one product in your catalog. Do they come back and buy more? And that was all driven by feedback from partners that then led to additional product development to then roll out. And I'll say sometimes that doesn't hit. And I don't know that we necessarily roll those products back out, but you take a product like Amazon Stores, which at its early days probably didn't have a lot of feature and functionality that sellers were understanding, but the Amazon brand store today has a ton of feature and functionality. It has almost a protective moat, if you will, for brands to be able to develop their brand story, their brand identity, to demonstrate more products. And so that's an example of a product that maybe didn't come out and meet the market need when it first came out, but as it started to have more value and momentum, it developed more over time.
When you mentioned the 5-year look back window, I almost immediately got a headache by thinking that somewhere Amazon has been accumulating data for 5 years, and there are so many data points that they didn't even know how to assemble them until years later, but they are all being pulled in and kept. It's very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things with AMC that people have to remember is that AMC is not absolute data. It's aggregated data and it's pseudonymized, meaning that it's not like customer level data, but it's being able to see across a group of products, across a group of cohorts to understand what type of buying patterns and behaviors may be occurring. And that's really powerful for an advertiser to understand where they want to be making investments. Because as you build a brand, you're building a catalog of products, and it's important for you to understand what are the products that bring a customer to you, which would lead to a new to brand type of sale, and what type of products are leading to repeat purchases, and what type of products are leading to additional purchases, right? And all of that becomes really important in product development, in catalog development, and advertising campaign development.
I think that some of the things that you said too about sometimes people will be like, oh, I tried that product, or maybe they're trying, the current rollout of something. And then, 5 years later, they'll be like, oh, I tried that program. It didn't work. I think it is really important for anybody who's actively pursuing Amazon to understand that a program is never going to be static. It's not the way that Amazon is that you have to be reassessing, because the way that the programs play with each other and as they develop and get feedback, a program like the store program or seller fulfilled prime that maybe didn't have a really warm welcome in the beginning can be a really, really useful tool as it iterates and evolves.
The best example that I've seen of this is AI, right? And I'm sure we're going to get into AI in general in this conversation, because I know Abe's a big AI guy as well. When something comes out in AI, and I heard this from one of our leaders at Amazon, I thought it was great. He said, today is the worst you will ever see it. Because AI by its general nature is constantly improving, it's constantly learning, and it's constantly getting better. And so you can make a snap judgment call when something comes out as to whether you like it or don't like it, whether it's good or whether it's bad. But how it actually interacts 3, 6, 12 weeks, 12 months, 12 years down the road is going to be completely different.
By the way, early on, after ChatGPT came out, there was a theory that AI would progressively get stupider and stupider because the first inputs came from data scientists and AI experts. That made it smart. As it interacted with average people, and that became more and more of the inputs, it went from science questions to cat videos, and it was doomed to go down to the lowest average level of humanity. Thank God they figured it out. It's actually getting better. But for a while, it was observably getting dumber and dumber week by week.
Well, and if you think about like, as we're all, whether we want to be called gurus or influencers or thought leaders in the space, whatever term you want to use, there's a natural tendency to always want to talk about what's new. I think we sometimes overcorrect to wanting to talk about what's new because everybody wants to be the first to talk about it because that's what's going to get the most attention. And one of the things I think we do that's a failure back to our audience is going back to talk about what's improved and what's changed and what is something that you weren't doing before that you're doing today. It's not as sexy, but I was in a dinner about a year ago, and the guy introduced Amazon Marketing Cloud as a new product that Amazon had launched in the last year. And I was like, well, actually, it's about a 5-year-old product that's been iterating in the market over the last number of years. And there's just new features and functionality that are making it more available, more accessible, and easier to use for a number of advertisers. And so we'd have to remember, one of the big philosophies I've been teaching a lot lately is this idea of test and learn, and that every brand should have a test and learn budget where you're constantly, iterating on your ad campaigns to find out what's working, to figure out where you need to change your investment levels. And you need to be doing that within the multiple levers that exist within Amazon. And everything that you do on Amazon is a different lever that you can pull, and it has a different value, and you can pull it at a different strength, if you will. And today, those levers may impact your business a little, and tomorrow they may impact your business a lot. And there's so many things that are a variance for everybody who's listening based on where they're at. Do they have one product, or do they have 10, or do they have 10,000? Is it a $12 product, a $50 product, or a $250 product, right? And it's hard as a thought leader in the space to give an absolute answer to any of these questions, because at the end of the day, it is very specific. And so one of the things I learned very early in my career is that the people who were successful were not the people who took courses. They were the people who were able to adapt courses and content to their business. And that's what I think brands should be thinking about, is like, how do you have an always learning mentality where you're ingesting, and then how do you actually prioritize what you want to do? And so one of the suggestions I've been giving to people is that you should be listing your task and, go back to a 4-quadrant, right? So high impact, high effort, low impact, low effort. And how do you determine what that level of impact and effort is, so that what you're working on are the things that have the moderate amount of effort for the most amount of potential impact?
One other thing that I think has been really interesting is that we're seeing some ad dollar shift with some of our brands because of the changes in PMAX, because of the changes in targeting abilities on Meta, the questions that are floating still around TikTok. How, a lot of when I'm talking to other digital marketers are like, wait, you're getting more customer data, more targeting abilities, because the attribution is so tight on Amazon. It can be really, really appealing. How do you see like AMC kind of playing into this, like this changing world where, again, Amazon's kind of doing a little bit of the opposite and providing sellers more ability to really find the right customers for the right products?
Yeah, I like to be very technical. We don't give any customer data.
No. It's good to clear that, yes.
Yeah, we do provide a lot of customer signals, and we do provide ways for you to be able to measure the impact of the advertising to those signals. And I think that when it comes down to it, when an advertiser needs to figure out where they want to spend their dollar, right? They're typically looking at a return on ad spend or an ROI, and they're looking for what we want to define as an incremental sale, meaning that they weren't going to get that sale anyway. What happens is that there's a there's a certain amount of traffic that's searching for a keyword on Amazon that you can attract into your funnel and drive to a sale using sponsored ads. When you start to think bigger and you start to get into sponsored brand, sponsored display, or ADSP, and you start to use signals to identify the type of shopper that you're looking for and the type of shopper who has a propensity to buy your product, you greatly increase the pool that you can expose your product and your brand to. And with precision, right, and being able to deliver the right ad to the right cohort with the right message, that's where you can drive the action that you want. Now, something that I'm very cautious of is that the action is different, right? And so it's not always a conversion as you start to move up funnel. But what we found with a number of our advertisers is that when they're able to run a sponsored TV ad or even a Prime Video ad, and then they're able to follow that up with lower funnel type of activities, their lower funnel activities become that much more effective in what they're doing because they're creating a bigger pool by which they can then market to. And so when you look at, we've heard these terms lead in, tent pole, and then lead out, right? And so when you use upper funnel advertising as a way to create a larger lead in audience, then when you get into the prime of your promotion, you have a bigger audience that you can market yourself into based on the signals that they've provided. They're demonstrating that they have more or less interest in your product, and that allows your ads to be more efficient and effective. And at the end of the day, if Amazon can do that better, then that's where you're going to spend your money. And I know my VP loves when I say this, but we're happy for you to come spend more money with Amazon if we're the most efficient and effective place for you to be spending it.
Yeah. Is there a threshold at which a brand or a company is big enough to start going past the standard seller central options into the programmatic stuff? You spoke about lead in and lead out and, DSP and the other tools. Now, one of the questions that I get very frequently, I'm sure you get it also, is it worth it for me to invest in DSP? And my biggest challenge is really interpreting results in a way which is clear for the people I work with. Seller Central, you spend $1, you get like 4 data points and a result. That's like very clear. All of the other ones is much more challenging for me to interpret clearly. Would you say that there is a place where a smaller brand is going to be able to interpret the results of their investment?
Yeah, I think it's a really fair question to be asking because I would be wrong if I was trying to sit here and say every brand should be spending upper funnel ad dollars. I think you need to get to a level of sophistication with your advertising and a comfort level with the, investment dollars that you have. I don't know that there's like an actual dollar amount to say it's 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, right? Because I think you can start to test it at different points along the way. But I do think if you're going into programmatic advertising, you have 2 options, right? When you go into programmatic advertising, you can use Amazon's algorithms to select the best places for you to go, which would be using tools like Sponsored Display or even like Brand Plus or Performance Plus. Or you can build out those campaigns yourself, which would be using the DSP and where you're actually going through and you're picking your own attributes. You're looking at AMC to kind of see, which audiences are aligned with your business and then trying to find more similar audiences to that. You want to have enough budget for that to be meaningful, to be able to get enough results so that at the end of the day, you can figure out that you want to make a higher investment. If I have to put a number on it, right? Because at the end of the day, people are going to want a number. I would venture to say that, what I typically would tell people is you should be looking at making somewhere between a $10,000 and $15,000 investment. Now that doesn't have to be in 1 month. That could be over a 3-month time period, but ads work when you give the ad campaign enough room to breathe, right? And it's a great terminology that I've been using for a number of years, but a lot of ad campaigns suffocate, for lack of a better term, because they don't have enough budget to get to their true potential. And so when you're thinking of middle and upper funnel advertising, you want to be thinking again about this idea of how do I get enough data insights back to truly understand whether it's making an impact in my business.
Interesting.
I had the privilege of meeting some of Jeff's parents and in-laws, and I think one of them asked me, like, what exactly does Jeff do? And I think that, and we've been asking some other guests, like, what do your kids think you do? I think that what you do is what you're so good at is being able to, in like, what was it, 2 minutes, articulate something that people have 4-hour conversations on in a way that's more actionable. And I think that's why Amazon is investing so much in like taking you all over the world to share about these things. As you've been doing all of that traveling, what has been the thing that has been the most, like, what is the most surprising thing that you've had from getting to go to all of these events? And, you know, because like you said, it's the after the event piece that can be the most fun and sometimes the biggest learning experiences.
Yeah, oddly enough, I think the I didn't see that coming was I started like posting on Instagram some of like the photos of things that I do while I'm on my trips. And it's my kids' friends who all follow me on Instagram and are now all asking me, what is it that I do and what's my job? So my kids have struggled for years to understand what I do and what my job is. But now I have their friends asking me that too. I think the biggest learning from travel is like, one, we have an amazing community. The stories that I constantly hear, even if I go back to like 2014 and 2015, and I went to my first trade shows in this industry, and I was meeting people like Mike from Death Wish Coffee and how he started that business, I'm still meeting people like that every day, wherever I travel globally, whether in the last year I was in India, Germany, China, France, and all over the US. And I'm meeting sellers who are building meaningful businesses that are creating jobs, that are creating amazing products. And that's something it always excites me about this space. And you can be doing it big and you can be doing it small. You can have one product or you can have a whole catalog of products. And the pride that brand owners have when they talk about their product and what it does and how they brought that product to market, I can never hear enough of those stories.
So what do your kids think you do?
Well, my kids are now in college and high school, so I think they've gotten a fairly good understanding of what I do, and they know that I do something in advertising. My son used to call it an evangelist because he couldn't say.
By the way, age has no relationship. I can tell you now, my 2 kids over age 20, I'm pretty sure one knows what I do and the other one still doesn't.
Yeah. I've started teaching, or I'm co-teaching a retail media course at The Ohio State University. And it's in conjunction with an education program that we do at Amazon. And I volunteered to be part of this program because my daughter is a student at the university. And I thought it'd be really fun to start I wanted to understand, like, if I was 18, 19, 20 years old and I wanted to go into this industry, what would it look like? How would I think about it? What would I need to learn? How would you teach me that today? And it's been really fascinating to kind of see how retail media is now being taught at the college level. One, the idea that retail media is being taught at the college level is pretty cool. Two, the students in these classes are like unbelievable. Like, they're doing summer internships at major retail media networks. The stuff that they have to go through, the fire hose of knowledge that they have to learn in this college course, they have to pass the sponsored ad certification test.
Awesome.
Like, that's a really, like, if I went and took it blind today without studying, I hope I could pass it. I think I could. Maybe I'll challenge myself and we'll post the results. But like, that's a lot of knowledge for somebody who hasn't actually worked on ad campaigns. And then when they end the course, they're actually managing a campaign. They do a 4-week campaign management for a brand.
That's awesome.
So, like, that's where my mind has really started to go, is really trying to kind of reshape, not necessarily about how do I tell my kids what I do, but like, how do we get really smart, good, young people to come into this industry that are the next wave of the Abes and the Robins and the Jeffs that will continue to propel this business for the next 20 years.
If you had somebody that wanted to do what you did now, would you say start on the entrepreneurial side, or would you say start with these courses, work for an employee, get some experience, like life experience, and then do the entrepreneur thing?
I would, if I was giving that advice, well, first off, I think you have to have an entrepreneurial spirit to want to go the entrepreneurial route. And so if you have that entrepreneurial spirit, I would tell you to follow it. If you're not,
Have you ever sold anything, Jeff? Have you ever been a seller?
I've been a seller on
Yes.
Amazon. Yeah, I've launched a couple different products on Amazon. I'd say that I was COVID retired, right? So when all the prices went up during COVID, I stopped selling and then I came to Amazon, and I technically can restart my business if I want to. I just have kind of been too busy to have focused on, restarting a seller business. But I do co-own two brands where I work, where I'm the owner of the brand. Somebody else is running it on a daily basis. So I do keep my fingers kind of on that side of the business. But
Listen,
I think the
it's
answer
definitely
on
vital.
Sorry, go ahead, Abe.
No, I was going to say, it's absolutely vital. I think it's absolutely vital for people involved in the back end of Amazon services, people working for Amazon, to have actually sold a thing, to have logged in Seller Central, gotten an email that you sold a
It's
thing.
not always possible, but I understand
Yeah.
it adds a lot more value when it happens. I think that if I was giving advice, I guess I am giving advice, but I think that you either want to go the agency route or you want to go the brand route. If you're a young person who's looking to come into this space, whenever I meet somebody who's been involved in the services side of this space and they say, I'm looking for something, what do you suggest I do? I always tell them to go get a job with a brand. Whenever I meet anybody who's been on the brand side of the equation and they say, I'm looking for something new, what should I do? I tell them to go get a job on the services side. The cross-pollination between the two, I think, is where a lot of value add is created, because you have to understand the granular work that a brand owner does, and you have to understand the collective work that you have to do at an agency or service provider. And so I don't think I don't think you have to go one direction or the other, but I think that if you're looking to get involved in this space, those are two directions that you can go that could lead to very successful careers.
How hard is it to get a job at Amazon? If somebody says, I want to work at Amazon, besides you, who do they talk to?
Yeah. Well, I would tell them to go to jobs.amazon.com. I would open myself up to say that all of us at Amazon are responsible for recruiting good people to come to Amazon. So if you think you could be an Amazonian, then reach out. I think that how hard is it to get a job here? I did not think that I was Amazon material when I came to work at Amazon.
Yeah, there's a mystique.
I had never worked in a big corporate environment. I didn't have the traditional background that maybe a lot of people at Amazon had, but I'm 100% positive that Amazon values the experience that I bring. Depends on where you're at in your career and to like what type of role and job you want at Amazon, and what type of work you'd want to be doing. But like, we call it internally, there's a bar for working here. And one of the things that's really interesting that I've seen is that bar does go up every year, meaning that somebody starting in my role today would have a harder time, because everybody has a harder time, but there's more expected of you than what was expected before. And so even if you're coming in with like an entry level position, like as an account executive and managing ads, there's a different expectation of what that role would have today than what that role had 3 years ago. If you think about the space has evolved, right? 3 years ago, Amazon's capabilities around DSP weren't as strong. So today we're looking for people who can also sell within the, sell and help brands within the DSP. So I think Amazon's a great place to work. I think that I've learned as much in my 3 years here as I did taking and earning my MBA back 25 years ago to date myself, maybe more. But I'd say like, you've got to want to, this is a culture that you have to want to work within, right? And so you should research the culture to understand a little bit about it to make sure it's the kind of place that you want to go.
What would you like, and I know you're a little bit short on time, but what would you say makes that culture unique? There's a lot of companies where they are hard charging. There are a lot of places who are performance driven or metrics driven or growth driven, or they are very granola in terms of
Yeah.
those
The
things.
cultures can go all directions.
Right. What would be the person of the culture if you had to describe it that way?
I think that, I mean, obviously this is my own opinion and everybody who works here may have a slightly different one. I think that Amazon is a very challenging culture, meaning that like they challenge you to give and be your absolute best, while at the same time to remain customer obsessed, and to think big, right? To me, like that's probably the one. If I had to like grade myself, I would still say that I believe I'm customer obsessed. I believe that people would say I'm customer obsessed. I don't think I think big enough. Right? Like, I don't think I'm always, and thinking big isn't always about how do you make more money, right? Thinking big is like, how do I impact more partners with the work that I do? How do I impact more brands with the work that I do? How do I create scalable models that allow more people to interact with me? Those are all other ideas that are around the idea of think big that isn't just, money, which is where people probably would naturally kind of tend towards.
The money follows the impact in a lot of cases.
And I think like the other thing that I really love about the culture at Amazon is that anybody can challenge anybody. It's not hierarchical. If I have a very good, valid point and I'm in a meeting with a VP or an SVP, I can bring that point up and they will listen. They will take my input and they will use that in the decision that they make. They may not make a decision based on what I shared, but they will listen. And I've always felt comfortable in being able to share openly and not be afraid of speaking my own opinion in my mind. And I'll leave it with this. When I joined Amazon, the bar that I set for myself was that, will Amazon let me be me? And if Amazon lets me be me, then this is a place that I want to be at. And I think for people who knew me before I came to Amazon, and know me now, you would probably agree that I am still the same person and I still act in the same way that I was before. And like, that's what I love about Amazon is that I have been able to come here and be myself and still give massive value to the community, which is something that, I thrived on doing before I came here.
Yeah, I would definitely concur that you are the same person.
Yeah.
In all the best ways.
I always joke. I drink the Kool-Aid before I came to Amazon. Like I didn't need to come here to be convinced that Amazon was a great solution for helping brands grow. I'm just sharing that message with a different microphone.
Well, you've been really gracious with your time, making time for us. I want to thank you for all the amazing advice you've given me. You have always been a champion for making sure that women's voices get heard, and helping and encourage entrepreneurs. So I want to thank you personally for the contribution you have always been to the people and to our space. And I want to thank you for being the extraordinary person you are.
Thank you, Robin. Thanks for having me on, and look forward to seeing the success of this podcast as you guys continue to give so much to the community. So thanks.
Thank you. This has been another episode of the Top of Search Show. We hope that you've enjoyed listening as much as we did recording, and we hope you have a wonderful week.
Thanks for listening to the Top of Search podcast. Have a burning question you would like answered or a topic you would like featured in a future episode? You can submit it at topofsearchshow.com. If you love the episode, subscribe and leave a review. Each month, we'll be selecting one reviewer to win a one-on-one call with your choice of Abe or Robin. Winners will be announced at the end of the first episode of every month.